The working world is changing, ladies and gentlemen. For many years, we have been talking about radical changes, mainly due to digital transformation, but also based on an increasing age of the population that will lead to radical changes in the way, where, and how we work. Now we have been seeing another quite radical change with the corona crisis. And this is a good time to take a broader look in what is happening. And this short presentation is supposed to give you an outline in the next levels of changes that we're going to see in the working world of tomorrow. My name is Stephan Sigrist. I'm responsible for W.I.R.E, a think tank focusing on interdisciplinary changes, working in between science and practice. First of all, we have been talking about digital disruption for many, many years. The expectations are quite radical. We see shifts in the working world due to artificial intelligence based on the increasing power of computers, at the end leading to a replacement of more people in many jobs. At the same time, we see that there are limitations that will probably not lead to the case on what has been promised. So we need clarity on the overpromises on artificial intelligence. First of all, this is something that can be changed. There is a low or a missing quality of data in many areas, especially in healthcare, leads to the consequence that when we don't have high quality data, there's nothing intelligent that will come out of these systems. Secondly, there have been many overpromises of AI based on the expectation that a computer can imitate or actually copy a human brain and lead to the replacement of humans. Now we know when we try to put these systems into action that this is not the case. Of course, in many ways, computers are much quicker than human brains, but the operations they perform are mostly based on historic data, and they do perform repetitive tasks quite good. But when it comes to complex problem solving, there are certain limitations. We have, of course, a growing number of cybersecurity risks that is also limiting the number of applications that we can have. And most of all, if we look at the discussions we had on the consequences of the long-term changes of digital solutions, there are mostly social challenges we're talking about. For example, the loss of privacy, discrimination that we see when we use, for example, AI tools to select new employees. For this reason, it's very important to take a closer look and look into the working world of the future, not only based on technological promises, but much more from the other side by defining the needs that our society will have. And in this bigger picture, looking at the potentials, the true potentials of technology on the one hand, and on the other hand, of the needs of society and humans, we think that we get to a much more realistic view. As mentioned before, it's not only technological changes and digital disruption that leads to a changing normality of the working world. As we've seen in 2020, it's also health-related issue, for example, the corona pandemic that has changed many things in a very short time. The big question, of course, is how much will change? And many people think that there is going to be a radical change of everything that we'll see. But as we also know, the human brain likes to compensate the needs that it had before in a similar way. Human needs are not changing radically, so there is good reason to believe that many of these basic needs, social interaction, the search for status, they will not go away. But at the same time, we have to expect that the COVID crisis, corona, is not going to go away in an instant, even if we would find a vaccine. So there's some things that are going to change that will define the new normality of the working world in the 21st century. First of all, the exchange, the physical distancing that will stay, meaning we have to rethink the ways on how we work. For a long time, we've been putting people together in rooms to intensify the interaction. Now that eventually is not such a big advantage anymore. So we will have to talk about distance. And most of all, of course, as we've learned, virtual working has become a new standard. Many companies want to change to remote working as a basic model. This will bring quality because people can work where they want, they get more time to take care of their family, but there's also limitations, as we're going to see a bit later. We also see a return of strong states leading to more regulatory issues. Very importantly, an increasing awareness for health. Now, this is not something new particularly, but I think we have learned that the health system is precisely and in many ways linked with the economic system and also with the social system. So it's also not an ideological question of strengthening health versus economic output. It's the same system. In the bigger picture, it means that all areas of life, where we live, whom we work with, what we eat, of course, they are all influencing our health, and that will also have a huge impact on the working world. We're also starting to monitor our everyday life. Now, of course, this is something that hasn't started just with Corona. We've been seeing many tools, especially in the HR environment, where systems try to track employees, measure productivity, and help the managers to optimize workflows and so far. Now, with the need to track health data, of course, this has been much more accepted by a broader public, but still there is other issues that need to be challenged. Also, we've seen the relevance of solidarity. So it's not only about optimizing the benefit of an individual, which is, of course, in the working environment, extremely important to strengthen the power of teams and not just individuals. Most of all, and also very importantly, due to the fact that we are confronted with this invisible enemy, there is a growth of insecurity and anxiety, which of course is quite critical, especially if the crisis is going to endure. So we will talk about that later on again. We also will need to think about how to motivate people, how to strengthen courage in the bigger picture. For the time being, of course, this means that we have a clear shift towards the digital transformation that will accelerate. Everybody knows. So there's new chances that we have, but with these chances, with the technologies, there's also limitations and risks which we should look at. So we've put together a few theses on the working world of tomorrow. As already mentioned, there's a clear boost of remote and virtual work and expected solutions. Already mentioned, a boost of productivity. We gain flexibility. It's much more easier to combine family life, to optimize work-life balances, and so far. But at the same time, very clearly, there's a limitation of social exchange, which is critical for team building, for education. And it also comes along with a loss of serendipity, because especially when it comes to strengthening innovation and bringing people together with new ideas, there is a very clear link to geographical and physical distances. From studies looking into innovation, we know, for example, that there is a link between how close people work together towards the number of ideas they're presenting. And in a virtual environment, people will not meet by accident as they do on coffee machines. So this is something we need to take care for, to optimize innovation capabilities at the same time with making sure that we all stay healthy and also increasing flexibility. Another issue is the trust in the virtual world, because of course we have more power to simulate avatars and to make look ourselves differently, which can be used for fun experiments using all the deep fakes. But at the same time, we will not know whether the person you see in a virtual channel is actually real. So in the bigger picture, that means that we will see a distrust in digital channels, which can be quite critical. Another thesis, another development that we need to look at is the analysis of productivity and well-being, something mentioned before quickly. We see a lot of tools that actually help to measure the well-being, the productivity of employees, something that is important, especially in a virtual working environment. But with the data, there's also a risk of discrimination. There's the risk of a loss of privacy, and the more tools we use that can give us recommendations on things that we should buy, on people we should work with, on things we should do. As algorithms work, they're always based on historic data. And algorithms don't come up with completely new, with crazy ideas. They bring up the statistical best solution. And at the end of the day, that means it leads to a homogenization of the output, which is not something that necessarily in an innovation-driven environment is what we want. So also here, a big pro, a better understanding of productivity, but also some major downsides that we need to look at in the bigger picture. If we try to understand what digitalization actually brings, I think there is a time to rethink the definition. For many years, we've expected artificial intelligence, human type, humanized robots that will take away our jobs or make our lives simpler, however you want to see that. But with the limited power that we've quickly discussed before, and with the more realistic judgment of where we can use the machines actually, we see a different picture, a picture that is actually not new. Because for many years, when we look at what digitalization actually did, what the internet is, it is a network. It is a standardized way to connect computers, and in the near future, to also connect cars, objects, doors, any objects that we have in our everyday life. So in the bigger picture, what we're going to see is open networks. And they are very relevant for many industries, from financial services to banking. Because in the core of these industries, we're going to see something like a digital backbone, where the centralized data, for example, of patients or banking clients are saved. You have all the processes that are on a regulatory perspective, be it for health insurances or for payments, that are actually in a pre-competitive context being transformed. And then based on this backbone, you'll see new ecosystems rising where the actual competition will take place. These ecosystems consist of different players, pharmaceutical companies, with medtechs, with insurances, with hospitals, with food providers, or in the banking sectors, of course, with many other industries that can provide services that are relevant for clients. Now, the competition will not take place on that basic backbone. It will take place in the specific ecosystems, and that means we need to think about the current structures that we're going to build up in a different way. It also means, for example, that there are new roles, for example, the state that probably is and will be responsible to define the basic standards and also take the initiative to initialize these structures. This is something that we hear not only from state representatives, but mostly from private companies, because we've seen that it is very important that there is a stable background. Taking this to the next stage, or again, try to understand where we're heading to. We still have an environment that is changing quickly and fast. This is something we've been seeing before Corona, coming along with many aspects of the digital transformation. But it stands in a high contrast to what we've seen in the past. Because over the past 30 or 40 years, we've had the luck of having quite stable environments. We also always knew that the economy would grow. We knew where things were wrong and right, but now we have access to real-time data that is changing from day to day. New client needs, new patient expectations, or new numbers that show how many people are suffering from the coronavirus. The problem is that these single numbers, they don't provide a big picture outlook. So actually, we are focusing on everyday changes, but at the same time, we lose the ability to think and talk, to think and act in the bigger picture. Now, the main challenge that we are eventually facing as an economy is to build up the ability to cope with insecurity. That sounds quite easy in the first place, but it is quite hard because you will not be able to rely on historic data. And what we'll need is probably something like long-term values that will help us guide through these constant storms, because this is going to be the new normalcy, even if Corona is going to be over. Now, what are the consequences? How can we react to these challenges? First of all, I think it's quite a good time, 2020, entering this next phase of digital transformation, having understood that health is an important part of the working world, to develop a long-term and a holistic perspective on a desirable working world. Meaning, we shouldn't look into technological progresses and think that the blockchain or artificial intelligence or any other type of technology will change the world like a tsunami and we just have to react. We should think about what is desirable, what kind of future we want, and then build innovation on those needs. First of all, of course, it means we need a holistic foresight system, because it's not going to be enough to just look into these changes once every 5 years or even once every 2 years. This is a constant process, because we need to learn which changes are relevant, which changes are not, and most of all transform that into an understanding of the future needs of clients, and more importantly, even on our society. On a second level, of course, we need to adapt individual and institutional skills. Quite obviously, with these changing environments, we need new skills. It's probably not that everybody needs to become a programmer, but we need to have a solid understanding of computational thinking. So we need to understand what an algorithm can do and what it can't. And we need to build interfaces between machines and humans, because quite obviously a lot of the repetitive tasks will be outsourced, and we're going to have help in the analysis of our health, in the growing of plants, or also by the composition of new foods, by artificial intelligence or by algorithms that will give us new combinations. But by choosing which ones are right and putting into a bigger perspective, that's very important. Next to these skills, it's also the attitude that counts. Because as a consequence of fast changes, we need to adapt. And adapting, we all know, is never easy. Many people don't like changes, they don't like adaptations, and for good reasons, we've had a very comfortable work environment. But this is not given. So if we want to stay competitive, it's not only the education, it's not only the skills, it's the attitudes, the passion that we need to be able to stay ahead and look for new solutions, because many of those, they're not being found with an Excel sheet. We need to try, we need to experiment, and we will fail. And out of these failures, out of these experiments, we will learn and come up with a new solution. There is no other way around. Third, very importantly, we also need to redefine workplaces towards a bigger understanding of our environment. We don't believe that work can happen completely virtually. As mentioned already, we lose track of our colleagues. It will be impossible to build up culture. At the same time, of course, we can learn, we can be productive, we can exchange ideas over far distances. So the nature and the role of offices will change. First of all, it will be about identification. In a more virtual world where everything looks a bit similar, it is important to know what are the values of a company and also to see and touch them. At the same time, we will come back to exchange in social environments, and exactly to exchange, it is important to have physical places to do that where people feel comfortable. Studies have also shown that in work environments where people can actually have an influence, where they can change things physically, they have a much higher productivity. And this is one of the roles that buildings and offices will have in the future. It's going to be more differentiating, not less differentiating, even though if we leave less space than before. It will also include health and social topics. For many years in the past, we knew that we need light in buildings, we need fresh air. For some reasons, that has been forgotten. Again, where we work does have a huge impact on our health. So bringing back a healthy environment in our offices is extremely important, and most of all also bring that back to our everyday life, also to our homes. Last but not least, in a bigger understanding of what's going on, we believe that there are huge chances for Europe, for Switzerland, and also for the Basel area to play a key role in this innovation ecosystem that we're building. Because on the one hand, we have China focusing on an authoritarian way where the state is actually defining the way forward, where the individual does not have much to say. On the other hand, we have a very market-oriented system in the US, which has also limitations by not taking responsibility for social consequences. So by defining a third way for innovation, combining social responsibility, focusing on human and social needs as a foundation for innovation on one hand, And by doing that, by combining people from different areas, so building ecosystems not only in virtual platforms, but in real life, we have a very strong place in being ahead in the race for this next search for innovative solutions, which will not be purely technological. The foundation for that are many of the things I've just said, but probably at the core, it will be a focus on human exchange. So regardless on the power and the resolution of digital displays or holograms and the possibilities that we have, the direct exchange between people is a key factor for developing differentiating strategies and also creating trust in this new working world we're heading forward to. Also, as an answer to the current corona crisis, the boost of the social immune system and entrepreneurship, strengthening courage in a times of crisis where the state had to take over, but the ability to get back and come up with new solutions, understand the crisis as a chance for new solutions in healthcare, in banking, and to drive innovation in a new way. I think this is the way forward we need to go. And I couldn't think of another place where this could work better than at the core of Europe. And I'm very much looking forward to discussing these questions with all of you. Thank you very much and a happy future.